You are now listening
You are now listening to the Black Male Educators Alliance podcast.
Lifting our voices.
Lifting our voices.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the BMEA Podcast, Lifting Our Voices. I'm your host, Chris Waston, with my co-host, as always, Mike Payne. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Chris?
Good, man. We here. We blessed. We have two special guests with us this evening, or morning, depending on when you're watching or seeing this. We have Jason out of New York. Jason, what's up, man?
What's going on, everyone? Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here having a conversation with you. I'm joining y'all all the way from the Bronx.
Okay,
So excited to talk.
Cool, man. Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time. You know, we're going to have a lot of fun and insight from you in this episode. And we got my man Sterling out of Philly. Sterling, how are you doing, sir?
Doing all right, doing good. You know, sitting here talking to the walls, but they're not talking back yet, so it's all good.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's good. All right. Well, let's just kind of jump right in. I mean, by now, if you've been rocking with the podcast, you are already very familiar with me and Mike, but we have two special guests, and they're here for a reason. Not only these brothers in education, but they're doing some big things in their community. And we got some things to tell you about a collaboration that we have in the works between our collective organizations. So since Jason introduced himself first, we're going to have Sterling kind of kick us off. Just introduce the listeners and viewers to who you are, why you do this work, and, you know, just anything you want to share with us, man.
Yeah, definitely. So again, my name is Sterling Grimes. I'm originally from PG County, Maryland, but I moved to Philadelphia right out of undergrad to start teaching. I joined Teach for America. I was placed in a middle and high school in North Philly and spent my time starting out just like being a teacher. So deer in headlights, didn't know anything about anything, but ended up finding my calling. I spent 8 years in the classroom teaching middle and high school English. I grew into a couple of teacher leadership positions. I was a grade team lead. I ran our DEI training, coached the SLAM team, took second place in the city my first year. So I was really proud of that kind of work. And while I was in classrooms, a couple of things became really clear to me. Like, number one, people like me, particularly Black men in education, were super critical and super needed, but pretty scarce. And two, like, there was a network that I was lacking. I remember going to my first principal and asking her, like, hey, I don't know who's out there who could provide mentorship, support, just like other guys that I could be with who know what it's like doing this work every day. Anybody who's been a male of color in education knows what it means to like hold that space and to be someone that a ton of kids go to because there aren't other people that know what it's like to be them in these spaces. And so she recommended that I connect with a guy named Sharif El-Mekki, a titan in the space. And he invited me to a gathering he had just started having with a couple of guys. It was a monthly dinner where we were literally just sitting down at a restaurant and kind of talking about our experience. And so that grew into the idea that we should let more guys into this space. So we said, you know, the 15 of us or so, everybody, you know, hit up 3 or 4 homies that you got. We're going to come to this thing and try to pull something together off the strength. Lo and behold, this cold, rainy night, 150 guys showed up. They came from DC, they came from New York, they came from all over. And they were like, we don't have anything like this where we're from. And so you guys have to keep going because this is just so critical. You know, the superintendent came out. We had people from city council. We had the newspaper there. It was such a huge moment. And that told us, like, we've tapped into something, like a huge need, a space that we can, you know, provide some support around. Fast forward a year later, we've incorporated as a nonprofit. And all of us are still working full time in education settings, but are using our spare time on nights and weekends to kind of pull this organization together that would become known as the Fellowship. And so I spent another year in the classroom, and finally our CEO, Vince Cobb, convinced me to leave to join the team with he and Rashid Coleman to start really ramping up our programming. So after I left the classroom, I spent 2 years working for the Fellowship full time. And in that role, because we were a young startup, everybody was doing everything. So it was part programming, it was part fundraising, it was part strategy, part partnerships. Everybody on this call knows exactly what all that is like. Trying to take on every single role all day long. But it was the most rewarding experience to take that leap of faith, honestly, on an idea that hadn't been fully proven yet, and to continue turning it into something. We're most known for our convenings, our BMEX, Black Male Educator convenings. We have, over the last 3 years, run 3 national conferences that have brought people in from all over. I think at our biggest, we had 1,100 attendees representing 38 different states. So just like a huge moment for us to be able to create a space to say, hey, do you need mentorship? Do you need professional development? Do you just want an affinity space for people who are just like you and know what it's like to do this work and be in these positions? We've got it. And so it has been incredibly rewarding to have had that experience. Over the last couple of months, I have also stepped into my own independent space. So I now run my own, I guess we can call it a consulting firm. Everybody's a consultant now. But what I'm tagging myself as is an equity practitioner. So doing my work in education around the focus lens of how do we ensure that we have a space that supports all individuals, but particularly provides a platform for me and people like me, men of color, to have space to do incredibly impactful work. We know people who spend their days, nights, and weekends, their own hard-earned dollars to pour into classrooms, to pour into our kids. And so I think it's part of my responsibility now as somebody who's been able to see this work from the classroom, from the school level, from a system level, from a national perspective, to really sort of leverage resources to ensure that those guys are getting what they need every day. So in these crazy times, it's been interesting trying to figure out how to pull different pieces together. But spaces like this one in particular, where guys all over the country are still making things happen just off the strength of the fact that we care about this, has been really gratifying for me. So super excited to be a part of this collab and to think about what the future holds for us.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for sharing that, because it's a lot that you said that I resonate with. One, about the many hats, because some days I'm like the technical guru. Everyone's like, well, Chris, how do we set this up? Or can you make this? And then other times I'm really relying on my classroom experience to think about that. So we definitely can relate here at BMEA. And it's interesting, like, how you talked about that gathering. We had an initial gathering too. Mike, maybe you can talk a little bit about, years back we had like that first mixer. And I think from that, the community had that same response. So Mike, talk a little bit about that memory lane, and then before we go to Jason.
So, first I want to say that a lot of the work they did in Philly kind of like helped organically inspire us to get rolling. So me and Dr. Curtis Lewis had a conversation around currently the school we were at the time had just had a different cultural environment because of so many Black men we had in the building. And I told him that because my experience in Baltimore City had been a little bit different, and even a little bit of experience I had in Atlanta. And so we were talking about creating an organization where we support Black men staying in education and also help recruit by using Black men to recruit more into the education. So we decided to throw a mixer at a local bar that we always go to on Fridays for a happy hour. We reserved some space in the back, and I want to say a good 60, 70 brothers showed up. We did a couple some icebreakers, and then just have conversations on what we were trying to do, man. And I think the overall energy and feeling about what we were trying to do just had so much positive energy that kind of catapulted us and saying yeah, we definitely have something on our hands that we got to take with and keep going and keep pushing. So all those hours, extra hours after school, extra hours on the weekend, even with kids like me, Chris, Doc, Brandon, we've all, Andre, we've all, put in time. Then we had some ladies who were very vital in our organization, supporting us and keeping us together and keeping us as a strong organization to get us to this point, man. So I definitely want to shout at you out though, Sterling, because really we've been to two of your national conferences in Philly. It's great. You guys have been a big part of, what we envision BMEA to do.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And hospitality is always great. And now, we were able to do our national conference, back in, 2019, Mike?
2018, yep.
18, yeah. But that was always something we looked at as a model of what we can kind of pattern what we wanted to do after. So, yeah, definitely a shout out. Moving on to the Bronx, Jason, tell us a little bit about what you got going on. Introduce the listeners and the viewers to who you are and the work you're doing out there in New York.
Absolutely. Just thanks again for having me here. As you can see, the energy is amazing between all of us. And I'm happy I got a chance to meet you all. And actually, we all met coming back to the fellowship conference that Sterling's team coordinated. So to see all of this come to life from us meeting a couple years ago to where we are today is super dope. So with that said, as mentioned, grew up in the Bronx, grew up in the South Bronx to be exact, and I'm actually a social worker. So where this journey started for me probably goes back to when I was in high school, a teenager, just trying to figure out my life, figure out who I am, really trying to focus in on identity and what it means to be a Latino male, growing up in the community that I was being raised in, and just watching all the different inequities that impacted our community and the people around us. So I had a lot of questions. I had questions about my peers and why they weren't graduating high school. I had questions about why we didn't have any healthy stores or organic places around my community. I had so many questions about what was happening, but did not know the words to describe what I was seeing. It was just questions. At the same time, I was somebody who was also trying to look for love, having not grown up with my parents, having to move around a little bit. There was a big part of my story where I felt like I was missing something, but again, couldn't put a name to what that was. So all of this led me to pursuing social work when I was an undergrad, which allowed me to do research and understand what it meant to be Latino, literally from the word to our ethnic origins, right? So we often hear people refer to folks who are from Latin descent as either Hispanic or Latino, not ever really knowing what the two mean, both being social constructs, right? And so this was part of my exploration, as well as just trying to understand what it means to be a man, right? What I grew up believing what it meant to be a man was not what it actually is. And so that exploration phase was really helpful for me. And ultimately, I answered questions. I was able to get to the responses to the many questions that I had, and came to the conclusion that all of these different inequities that were created, that I experienced, were intentionally created by policies, society, etc., where one group of folks have a lot more benefits than other groups of folks in which this country was founded and created on, right? And so as I started to understand this, I then said to myself, I need to do something about this. How do I have an impact to give that allows me to give young people in my community an opportunity? And I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know where I was going to end up. These were just questions. These were just things I was trying to figure out. I started working in nonprofit in different fields, working with high school youth, right? And so everything from probation to youth in foster care to outpatient rehabilitation centers, right? Just trying to get my feet wet across these different industries within what we know to be as social work, to see what it is that I want to do. Really interesting, because you get to hear the firsthand experiences of many of the young people that are living through these inequities and what's impacting them and how it's impacting them, but also seeing the resiliency behind it. How do they continue to get up every day and move forward and smile through everything that they're experiencing and all the positivity while trying to get on their feet? And through all of this, I said to myself, well, what helped me out? The answer to that is education. So I had to take a step back to say, how do I have large-scale impact in education in a way where we can create opportunity for many people instead of just one or two people, right? How do we get a seat at the table? What does this look like, et cetera? So I went to graduate school to continue pursuing social work, but studied a leadership track. So a lot of people, when they think of social work, they think of this clinical work, this one-on-one work, where I have to sit down with you and work with you and help you come up with a plan to better your life, et cetera. But a lot of us don't realize that as a social worker, I can enter any industry, and only about 10% of social workers actually follow a macro level track, a leadership track like I did, which essentially teaches you the business side of nonprofit using the social justice framework. So I took all of this in my real-time experiences. I was working in nonprofit spaces and started to figure out what was happening from a leadership standpoint, in which a lot of times what I saw was our leadership didn't reflect the young people that they served. And a lot of policies and decisions were being made for these communities with nobody from the community sitting at the table. And as I started to see this, and I started to learn in graduate school what it meant to be a leader and the different type of organizations that exist, I then was able to put all this together to start carving out what my path was going to be. Some way, somehow, I ended up at NYC Men Teach in New York City. I didn't have any plans of that. I knew somebody that worked there. She said, I think you would be dope for this position that we currently have open. And the universe just kind of aligned, and it led me to NYC Men Teach, which really focuses on the recruitment and retention of male educators of color. And NYC Men Teach started in 2015 out of the New York City Mayor's office. The name of the office in particular is called the Young Men's Initiative, which really focuses on all things that have to do with supporting men of color and young men of color. And when they launched the initiative in 2015, the goal was to get 1,000 male educators of color into New York City public schools by 2018. And we were able to do it, fortunately. And so NYC Men Teach, when describing it, can get really confusing because we are a really large initiative in terms of the impact. So we work out of the mayor's office, the New York City Department of Education, as well as the City University of New York, which the acronym, the word that we use is CUNY, which the acronym is City University of New York. And under that is 24 institutions. So think of CUNY as the umbrella term for all of the community colleges in New York City, both junior and senior colleges. And so we are currently at 15 of those campuses where we have program managers that work with young men of color that are interested in going into education. They don't have to be majoring in education, but they may have an interest in working with young people or have curiosity around what it means to teach. And so because of this unique relationship that we have, we are able to really make things happen and make decisions. And we have the flexibility to really try to build out for our guys as much as we could, fortunately, through the support of our leadership, et cetera. And so we hit that mark in 2018. And now the New York City mayor just announced another goal of getting another 1,000 by 2022. And just so that you know, in terms of the New York City landscape, what this looks like, we have 1,800 public schools across New York City. In New York City, if you're not familiar with this landscape, looks like it's 5 boroughs. Think of it as 5 counties that come together to make one large system. So that's the Bronx, that's Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, and Manhattan. And we have 1,800 public schools across all of these boroughs. And the recruitment for all teachers comes out of our office. So we recruit all the teachers every year for all 1,800 public schools. There are 75,000 teachers and 1.1 million students. Our students are about 82% of our students identify as students of color. And so the reason this initiative it launched was because in 2015, out of the 75,000 teachers we had, only about 8% identified as male educators of color. And so we see that the disparities there. 51% of our student body are young boys of color, right? And so the gaps exist. We know it. We all do the work. And a lot of what we continue to try to build on and focus on is transforming education through diversity recruitment, through professional development, through mentorship, through affinity groups, et cetera, to really provide that support. Not only do we want to get our guys into our schools, but we want to make sure that they stay there and they feel supported and welcomed throughout their journey. So that's sorry for taking up all that time, but it's a little bit about my story and how I ended up in NYC Men Teach and then the work that we do.
No, it's interesting because when we decided to have our Black Male Summit, the idea around planning it was like trying to find different organizations around the country that were doing the similar work. So that's how I got in contact with Jason. He actually presented at our summit in September of 2018. We had a group from MSU, we had a group from Chicago, and then Jason was coming from New York. And so I think it's just one of the important things is that like we're doing the same work, but there are different things that you can learn because different cities are in different places in terms of progress, in terms of like what they have to deal with economically, what they have to deal with culturally. And so like just his perspective and what he's doing and the work that they're doing and just like ideas, being able to bounce ideas off of it has been great. So we've been able to keep this friendship and this working collaboration since 2018, just like trying to move the mission forward.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is that what you see with NYC Men Teach is that they're getting a lot of support from the local government, and I think it can be a model to what we can try to implement in other cities. This is something that the mayor here, where we're at here in Detroit, or even the governor can support in different areas. So I think it's really great to just the people doing the work being open with sharing and collaborating, because we all have similar goals and missions, and we're all trying to find a way to, solve problems for the sake of our kids. So I definitely appreciate hearing from both of you. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week. The listeners probably realized and saw that me and Mike were on Zoom. And obviously we know that's a large part, well, not a large part, it's definitely because of the current situation with the COVID-19 virus. I'm just curious to hear from Sterling, and then we hear from Jason, like, how's that the current, lockdown situation impacting schools and students, or even you personally out there, if we could talk a little bit about just how you doing, how you managing, and how's it maybe impacting the work.
Yeah. I think everybody everywhere is trying to figure it out, and we're all just like really, one of the things we said when we started the fellowship was that we are building the plane as we fly it. And that's literally what's happening here. So every day there's just new information being put in and tons of people who are trying to be as thoughtful as possible. I think the biggest logistical pieces right now have really been, one, making sure that we're still providing those essential services for kids. So the last couple of weeks I've been at the school that I was guest teaching at, helping with meals, making sure that kids could come in if they needed, lunches, breakfast, extra snacks, things to make sure that they were just kind of taken care of in some communities where, school was the place that guaranteed, some of their meals each day. So that was step one. Step two, we started making sure that students had laptops so that we could go to online learning, which has been, I think, a ton of experimenting for lots of people, but staff have really stepped up to figure out the best ways to provide access for students, to make content engaging, make it manageable, since no one is there to provide you that one-on-one space that we would normally have. So honestly, of course, our frontline health workers are our heroes right now. Educators are the other set of heroes that are out here holding this together, that are making sure that kids are still getting something while we still figure out what this looks like, between now and next year. Many states have already shut down the entire calendar for the rest of the school year. And so it's okay, what are we doing with the next 2 months that some schools still have left? That's a huge undertaking. So really, it's been a lot of meeting and planning and figuring out how to get yourself to the next benchmark of let's just get through this week and then we'll figure out the rest. And so that's been most of my sort of out of the house time, is really just going to the store or going to my school to, hand out supplies. And so personally, I think it's been helpful to have engagement with students. That has really always been my sort of saving grace. Even when I left the classroom, I stayed a coach of my slam team an extra year because that gave me an excuse to be back at my school. And so having those check-ins, I just did one yesterday with one of the mentorship groups that I run. So we just did an hour-long sort of mental health check-in, and it was just a good time to be able to talk to students, see how they're doing, trade strategies, set up some plans for next week. The kids who are going to be on the video game together, they got their set. The ones who are going to, collab and make a TikTok, just kind of continuing to build that community. That's been, I think, the biggest strategy that I've kind of used. Don't let yourself get stuck inside your four walls. So for me, it's really about keeping a schedule, doing what my therapist told me to do, and making sure that I can still be accessible to people, so that even though we're having to do this all virtually, there's still a sense of presence and some kind of normalcy that we can hang on to while we're figuring out what this looks like long term. Absolutely.
Jason, how is it out in New York? I mean, that's a lot of students to be out, 1.1 million students. I know that I would read about it and hear about it here in the news in Michigan, but we've been in this for a while now. So how things going out there?
It's similarly to probably a lot of other major cities. I think because we are such a large school district, a lot of what we spent time doing in the beginning was trying to figure out what this transition looks like for our students. And schools were in different places with this. Some schools were ready to rock and roll. They had great attendance with students prior to the transition, so it was a little easier for them to then transition over and still see high attendance rates. Some schools struggled with that a little bit. Similarly to what Sterling mentioned, technology became a big challenge, and so the Department of Education in New York City did the same thing. They started to hand out a ton of laptops, a ton of iPads and other devices that allow students to utilize these services. Zoom, or actually Zoom has been banned from the Department of Education in New York City, but other things like Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts, et cetera, right? And so these different systems that allow students to still get a chance to learn and meet with their teachers, et cetera. So I think that similarly has been a challenge. And I think that teachers also are in different places with it, right? You have some teachers that are able to kind of transition and teach and rock out, and a lot of teachers are trying to figure it out. Some teachers may not know how to use technology. Some students may not know how to use technology, right? And so I think all these different challenges come into play. You may not have the support that you feel like you need. You may feel like you're isolated, right? So all of these different things matter, and especially when you're a man of color working in at least in our school system, you are one of very few in your school building. So if you didn't feel supported beforehand, chances are you're not going to feel as supported virtually. And if you are, that's fortunate. But for us, a lot of what we try to do, and we operate from the central office, is still host events where the guys are still able to come together and learn from each other, build with each other, and just talk about wellness. So we've done a number of different events virtually on Instagram Live and other platforms where we've had teachers come on there and talk about some of the pedagogical skills that they're using and things that are working for them and approaches to their virtual learning to share with others who may be struggling. I'm an adjunct professor, one of the many hats that I wear for 2 universities in New York City. And I myself also had to go through this transition with our students. And I teach a course that is a college credit course for high school students. So before coronavirus, they were coming to the university to take this class, and we all transitioned. So the biggest challenge for them has been trying to balance their day-to-day school life along with this class and all the other commitments that they're having. And I had a student who, her mom was diagnosed with coronavirus, and she had to step up and take care of her siblings. So her mom was in quarantine. She had to step away from school to make sure that her siblings had food to eat, right? To make sure that she was taking care of herself, etc. And so I didn't notice. She disappeared. Like, she was just off the map, but I knew something was up because she was always present. And when she spoke to me about it, I was like, oh, I knew something was happening, but still trying to be there to support her, to let her know, like, yo, just talk to me. Let me know what's going on. We'll do some stuff on the side, because I get it. A lot of people are sitting here talking about, go, while you're home, go build your next business, go do X, Y, and Z. And the reality is what we're experiencing is not normal, and it's traumatic. Like, it is, right? And so to not be able to see people, to not be able to, like, go to the grocery store in peace, to not be able to do some of these things that you're used to doing on a daily basis, it becomes problematic. And yeah, I think, we should stay motivated and try to create our schedules and do X, Y, and Z. But I'll be lying to you if I sat here and said that I feel great every day. That is a lie, right? And so I think part of what I've been doing just for self-care, because that was the second piece to the question you asked, right? Outside of school is just like trying to stay busy outside of my 9-to-5 job. So adjuncting. I also launched my own podcast, me and my boy Kevin, shout out to him. Quick plugins called Live from the Bronx, streaming on all platforms. And a lot of what we're trying to do is, I throw up the X's. I appreciate that. And a lot of what we're trying to do is similar to what I mentioned in my introduction, is try to figure out how to create opportunity in this space for people who are up and coming in the Bronx, creatives, change makers, entrepreneurs, etc., to come on the show, be interviewed, and talk about their experiences and the work that they're doing. And so fortunately, we've been able to do something similar to what y'all doing on a virtual platform, and just continue to interview folks and have fun. And that's been taking up a lot of time. And I'm also looking I just actually filed for my own LLC as well, and just got approved for it. So that's exciting. But really just trying to come out of here, appreciate that. Really just trying to come out of here with a game plan and stronger than what I was before I came in here. So I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready for this when we get out of this coronavirus.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to, before I pass over to Mike, but I do think I can resonate with that, on a few things you said. Like today, I just woke up, I wasn't feeling, I had a lot of stuff on the agenda. You had those loose ends. I know I needed to get an email out to you all about some things, and I just kind of woke up with the weight. And then we're in the middle right now where the quarter is closing. So students, and I'm an assistant principal of a high school. So a lot of my seniors are like, what's happening with my graduation? And so it was just stressful. All this stuff was kind of went, because I knew today was going to be a lot of Zoom meetings and a lot of decisions and communicating. And I knew we were doing this podcast, but I had to kind of push through. And I think as an organization with BMEA, I'm excited about some things we have going, because we're really mobilizing and really getting the ball rolling even like faster and wider spread on our digital platform. So I do think, I can resonate with like that feeling of, okay, this the new reality for now. All right, we're about to make the best of this, because we have to make some shifts and some things we were doing. And I don't know, Mike, if you want to talk a little bit about the virtual fellowship, but I do want to start talking about, while we're all here too as well. So Mike, I don't know if anything you want to add to that before we start talking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like being in the school system, like as we've had a transition for our kids, I've been thinking about like how this affects Black kids like directly, right? And then I also think about how does this affect our teachers? And so it's like one of my biggest things is like making sure that teachers are teaching what we decide to engage our kids with is culturally responsive to who they are, right? And part of the reason why I think it's important to have more Black men in education, because culturally there's a connection there with the students. They see themselves. And so we were planning this fellowship, and then when the virus hit, I kind of like, lost a little bit of steam, what I mean? Because I'm like, dang, I was looking forward to meeting with them in person, and they had already, expressed how good it was to just be able to have that time and space to collaborate and connect with other brothers in the same struggle. But like Chris said, I think once we realized where everything was headed with these Zoom meetings, we replanned it. So we're starting the fellowship next Saturday. We got our guys ready. We got them on. We're gonna get them, technologically savvy. We're gonna give them some ebooks to read, and I'm still excited to support them, man, because I think, and the biggest thing for me too is like we don't know how long this is gonna go. So how do we support people with this new way of life, and more importantly, how do we support them supporting our kids? Because I think they're suffering the most out of this experience, not being able to learn the same way they were originally learning, not having the same support, not having that safe space, not having that physical like interaction with adults that they trust and care in a school setting. So, making sure that these new traumatic experiences and these new things that are going to be coming up, that we are in a space where we can kind of speak for our students. So that's important too. But this fellowship I'm excited about. We're going to start next Saturday and really get these guys moving and going in terms of what does cultural responsiveness look like, not just in the next year for the classroom, but also for virtual learning, if that's where we're going to be.
Can I ask you a question? Can you just tell me, and this is just me wanting to know, because we were thinking about doing a summer fellowship that we actually have every year, but we're in this crossroads with what's happening. Who can participate in your fellowship? What is it about? And how long are you guys going to have the fellowship for with everything that's happening?
So the program runs for about 6 weeks. It's 6 different sessions, which we adjust. But the basic idea is that like we want to take Black male educators that we know in the area, whether they're new to teaching, whether they've been teaching for a long period of time, whether they maybe are thinking about getting into teaching, whatever the case may be, principals, admin. Like right now, it's a more of a general fellowship, because the concept is like, even though BMEA is a collective is supporting educators, we want to make sure that the Black male that we have in classrooms are effective. So this fellowship is kind of just like bringing us together to say, okay, what does it mean to be an effective teacher? How does that look as a Black male educator, right? So it's not just being Black, it's also making sure that you're culturally responsive. It's also making sure that you're restorative. It's also making sure that you are reflective in what you need to improve as an educator to be better for your kids. So that's what our fellowship includes. And our partnership with Henry Ford Learning Institute is to also give them some like organizational tools to kind of be able to work things out in terms of solving problems that they may have, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in the school community, whether it's with themselves. They have a lot of good learning tools that you can use to kind of like do some like physical thinking, right? Like empathy maps, things like that. So, it's really engaging, man. And I'm excited for, I'm gonna document it for you so you guys can see. And then moving forward, we're thinking about breaking fellowships into smaller sections, like early teacher fellowship, or administrative, like aspiring administrators fellowship. So I think this experience, more than anything, is a learning experience for us as we figure out, what makes a fellowship effective and useful and meaningful, and then also what needs to be covered in it, or how can it look differently for different folks.
Yeah. Dope. Looking forward to it. That's going to be kicking off this Saturday, and we had promoted it maybe a couple months back. We were accepting applications, so we had about 30 guys to be a part of this initial group, by the way. So transitioning a little bit, Mike gave me a call maybe about a week and a half ago. He's like, hey, I need you to connect with Jason and Sterling. We're coming together. We're connecting Detroit, New York, and Philly, and we're going to connect the whole world, and essentially, right? And I was like, okay, this sounds really dope. And essentially, he said, man, it's going to be called The Village. And when I heard that name, it kind of, me and Sterling, we were just talking about this before the call, like just that name kind of speaks when you say the village. And that's really what brought our respective groups and thoughts and, you know, just this collaboration. So I don't know, Sterling, you want to kick it off just talking about the idea behind the village and, you know, what kind of brought us together and what can people expect from this collaboration? I don't want to undersell it, so I'll let you kind of kick us off.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris, like you mentioned, it takes a village, right? We've all heard that growing up, about raising a child. But for us, as we were kind of talking about just the general concept of what we had all been doing in different ways between our 3 different areas, we realized it's going to take a village for us to get through this period of whatever we want to call this right now, and figure out what the new normal will be. And particularly for the educators that we all know on the ground every day, like there can never be enough support because we know that it's not actually coming from the places it should be in the ways that it always needs to. And so the village for us became a place where we wanted to create a space for men of color in education to be able to have access to one another. So again, that sense of community, that affinity space that is obviously lacking right now while we're all being socially distanced. But 2, to have a space for resources and guidance and opportunity for growth and collaboration. So it's really going to be sort of a one-stop shop, choose your own adventure. Long-term, our vision is that it kind of takes on what the needs of different educators are. But for the beginning, we really wanted to just start curating a conversation, build a space where we could speak to the issues, the experiences, the challenges that we are all facing right now, bring to light some of the particular nuanced perspectives that are important to our community, and make sure that there's voice and space given to that. So a really exciting venture for us to kind of undertake. I think it speaks to larger equity issues that we definitely see in education. It speaks to some of just the everyday stuff that we think is important for people to hear. Right now there are all kinds of stories being told about all kinds of different people. And I think it's really been incredible to see lots of different people's creativity and talent come to light. And so we want to make sure that we continue to shine a light on educators who are on the front lines every day, who are going to be making the critical decisions and might not have spaces of their own to do so. And so for us, it's really about the fact that we've been fortunate enough to be in this work for, a couple of years. We've learned a ton of things that we think should be shared. There's space in this for everybody to win. So we want to make sure that we do what we can to curate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jason, talk a little bit about, I know we're putting together this first virtual event very, very soon. So give the listeners just a tease of what they can expect from this first gathering of people. Then Mike, you can always jump in too with your thoughts.
Absolutely. So April 30th, is that next Thursday? I think that might be next week or whenever that is, right? Who knows now with what's happening in quarantine.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know what day of the week it is, man.
Yeah, what day is it?
Yeah, but whenever that day is, right, coming up really soon, we are going to take this to the next level. So we're going to take this from a conversation that we're having right now to an actual event where Detroit, New York City, and Philadelphia are going to collaborate on exactly what Sterling just described, this village, right? What it means for us to come together, not only just within our cities, but as in a national network in which we are having a discussion about what it means to have a network of support for our male educators of color. We're going to talk about the work that we're doing. We're going to talk about what we're trying to build out. Sterling mentioned this idea of essentially trying to identify all these different organizations that do similar work across this country to come together to advocate for this change that we need in education. So everything from diversity recruitment to culturally relevant education, to understanding your positionality and identity within the classroom, right, to having that network of support, et cetera. And so this is going to be the start of those conversations. So please join us on that day to engage in dialogue with us so that we can take this to the next level.
Absolutely. And the only thing I wanted to add to that, I guess for people that maybe to understand the importance of this conversation is like, as a whole, as a nation, us as educators are always, us specifically as educators of color, are fighting against the white supremacy that's intertwined within our school systems, intertwined within our curriculum, and what holds a lot of our students back. And so as we become educators, like, you are either a part of the system or you are like a liberator of the system, right? And that's just not easy to do in a silo by yourself. And so, we've been inspired by Philly. We've learned from New York, we've inspired other groups in other cities. And so the idea is that, there are people of like mind in other areas who are trying to do this work. Let's collaborate. Let's share what we're doing. Let's talk about what do we think are the key issues. Let's talk about what we think those solutions are. How can we support one another? Like, what do you need as teachers? How do we support new teachers, or how do we get new teachers? So there's a ton of stuff to talk about by all means. And I think it's just takes it to the next level. And now we don't have to fly across the country to see each other or have this conversation. You can do it right now, and we can make that larger impact immediately. So I'm very excited for what's coming up with this, man. Very excited.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, man. When you think about even when, like, how some of our students, if you don't have, like, it's a sad reality that for some students, learning stops because the school setting, is no longer viable. And thankfully, certain systems are trying to provide the access. But you think about organizations as well. Like, if we are not adaptable, our progress can stop in the work that we're trying to do. So I do think it's kind of a divine intervention, and just speaks to our commitment collectively to keep this going, because, we could all just sit back and say, oh, we're just going to wait till this is over. But I think now we're digging in deeper and saying, you know what, let's build this up, because we can't necessarily rely on some powerful force to keep our collective work going. So it's going to take us, using these technology and digital platforms to continue the collaboration, continue to do this work, to support one another. So I'm excited to be a part of that. And also, right now, if you're listening to this, you can actually learn more about the Village on our website. We just put up some information. That's BMEAofmichigan.org/The Village. No spaces, no dashes, just The Village as in one word. And you can check us out where we have more information about the upcoming event, flyers, and all that information. But that's April 30th, The Village. If you are a part of an organization, you need to be there. If you want to learn about things going on in our 3 cities and beyond, you need to be on there just to get the information, just to connect, just to kind of see what's happening and finding out how you can be a part of something to make a difference in your community and around the world. So I definitely want to encourage you, the viewer, the listener, to, reach out to us, because, like I said, this is a collective effort, and it takes all of us. No one group can get it done. But I think you just heard from even just our stories, 3 different organizations in 3 different cities and states, working to get things done on behalf of our students and supporting our men of color and doing so in the classroom. So, gentlemen, we're getting close to the end here. And one thing we always do is give a shout out. We're shouting out people that inspire us, people doing impactful work, students on the grind. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of time to think, because I kind of put you on the spot. But I'm going to start off with my man, Mike Payne. Who you want to give a shout out to this week?
Oh, man. Who I want to give a shout out to? You know what, man? I think I shouted out the medical workers last week and people that I know that passed. I do want to shout out all those kids at home who are working in the grocery stores, who are still essential workers, who are still trying to balance out, schoolwork in the virtual classroom. And I'm shouting y'all out, for keep grinding and keeping y'all head up. I also want to give a special shout out for everyone who's at home, isolated, dealing with any type of social anxiety or depression. Like, keep your head up, like, seek help, don't do it alone. And I know that, my heart is with y'all too.
We're going to go to Jason next.
I think Michael covered everyone. Just generally speaking, I wasn't ready for this, but kind of along the same lines, man. Just those folks who just, even if you're working from home, take some time to utilize self-care. Think of self-care and what that means. So I'm shouting out those people who may be feeling pressured by people to go start the next thing and figure out how to change the world tomorrow. Like, you could do all of that, and please do whatever floats your boat. But I do think that it's important to take that time to really self-reflect and just not do anything sometimes. Don't even engage. And I just want to shout all of y'all out there who are doing this, and putting your self-care first still, and not getting caught up with a lot of the different messages that are being out there. So shout out to y'all. Just take care of yourselves, and we could build together some other time, but definitely take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Sterling?
Really quick shout out to y'all. I appreciate you all for thinking of me and allowing me to be in this space. This has been the wildest ride of my life, and the fact that it gets to continue and that we get to kind of just take it into our own hands and have, I think, become like leaders of this. And I don't feel like I'm old enough or experienced enough to do that, but I'm gonna step into that space and claim it like I am. So I appreciate being along on this ride with you all. One thing that's really been resonating with me this week is the people who make the decision to do the right thing, not the easy thing or the convenient thing. And I think that looks like a lot of different people right now. It's school leaders who are like, I'm going to make every resource available so that my staff and my kids get what they need. It's city government leaders, state government leaders, national government leaders, who are choosing to say, like, we're going to do what's right for people, not because it's best for business, not because it's best for our bottom line, but because it's what we need to get by. And I don't think those people get enough credit for the fact that they are often making really tough choices that are often coming with a ton of sacrifice so that people who they may never even come into contact with can get by. It's a huge, I think, mark of character to just do the right thing, regardless of whether or not you're going to get the shout out or if you're going to win the next election or if you're going to get the promotion. And so we need more people doing that thing, because those are the people that we are, right? In classrooms every day. We're not doing it because somebody's going to come in and hand us a check and a plaque. It's because this is what that kid needs, right? And so I just want to say shout out to those people. We see you. We appreciate you. If no one's told you today, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Those are great. I want to shout out, and it's kind of similar to, I think Mike hit on this and you all as well, but just I want to shout out the student that's struggling right now. You know, I'm thinking about the student that grades were low and they haven't had the opportunity, or because I think that we can kind of think kids are robots and like, oh, you're at home. But I want to shout out the kid that has a trying circumstance, that, you know, may have a family member that's sick or has passed away, or younger siblings and parents that's working. And I know sometimes we, and I'm saying we because I'm guilty of this at times too, our communication to students, especially in this time, can be like, hey, get your grades up, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're logging in. And, you know, we don't always maybe extend or say it enough that we understand some of you are going through a lot, right? And I just want to shout out those students because we do understand and we do empathize with you, and we're going to support you. To me, it's not about grades. It's about you as an individual, your health, because this is be a minor setback. So I want them to know that, you know, we commend you, the ones that is truly juggling a lot and may feel like, why did this happen? You know, I was, you know, life was normal 5 weeks ago and I was just going to school, and, you know, maybe you were slacking off or something. I don't know. Maybe you were doing great, but a lot has been pushed on a lot of students, and I just want to shout you out for trying to manage it and understand that the adults around you, we're all trying to manage it too. This is new for us all, and just understand that, so don't beat yourself up too much. Any final comments or words, Jim, before we get ready to sign off? Okay, I'm gonna take the silence as a no. Mike, you thinking? Are you good?
Nah, man, I'm excited on everything that's coming up, man. Make sure you guys look out for that flyer for the Village virtual event coming soon.
Absolutely. Well, it's Chris Watson, you know, representing BMEA. Got my man Mike, got Sterling, got Jason, New York and Philly and Detroit all together. It's a beautiful thing. We're going to sign off here. We hope that you stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the BMEA Podcast, Lifting Our Voices. Take care.